This is a video about possibilities. The coin is still turning. Hey Legacy of Kain fans and other weirdos, welcome back. It's been a great time the last few months with Soul Reaver 1 and 2 Remastered, and we've even dusted off the other Legacy of Kain games too. The only thing that I've done longer than writing, directing, and editing is playing Legacy of Kain.
Vae Victis!
I've been a fan of the series since 1997, and right now there's an energy, an excitement for the series that I haven't felt in decades.
The first bitter taste of that terrible illusion. Hope.
It's been great making these videos and hearing the experiences of longtime fans, but it's been just as exciting to hear from players brand new to the series. Some great news. Soul Reaver 1 and 2 Remastered exceeded sales expectations slightly, and BitBot's The Dead Shall Rise graphic novel Kickstarter, and Lost in Cult's Nosgoth Encyclopedia and Scourge of the Seraphim tabletop role-playing game backer kit projects exceeded their goals by a lot. So with all of that said, I believe the chances of getting a new game in this series are better than they've been since 2012. More on that later. Now, while I'm aware I'm far from the first fan to do this,
It seemed my method was not altogether original.
I'm going to lay out what I'd like to see in further remasters, a remake of Blood Omen or Soul Reaver, or, fingers crossed and breath held, a brand new entry in the series to continue or even finish my favorite video game vampire story. Let's start small. If Aspire's ambitions are only remasters, then here's what I think each game needs. Soul Reaver 1 and 2. 9.5 out of 10. Most of the way there, guys. Great job. It looks great, it plays great, and I get all warm and fuzzy inside every time I boot it up. Which is no surprise, considering the development was headed by legendary fan modder and Legacy of Kain community leader Raina Audrin. All the bonus features, including the recently added E3 1998 demo, were just the icing on the cake. Some folks are calling for a director's cut of cut content from the original end of the game, but let's just fix a few more bugs, maybe turn up the Reaver sound effect in the material realm, and we can call those two good. Nice work. Blood Omen 1. I'm sure this would be the hardest to do a remaster of, but at the very least, modern audiences would appreciate this game a lot more with some basic quality of life upgrades, such as a weapon quick select cross maybe, and eliminated load times. Seriously, they're ridiculous. On its own, it's still a very solid game. It's just too clunky for a lot of its potential audience to play in 2025 without mods. Now, if we're going hard on a remaster, I'd want to see the same story, polished up with redone FMVs, rebuilt sprites too. Maybe they could try the HD 2D approach, like with the recent Dragon Quest and Suikoden remasters. Stripped down HUD, even though it's one of the coolest, it's huge. Omnidirectional movement controls, and no load times. I'd want to preserve Simon, Anna, Tony, Paul, and Richard's performances, and up the audio quality any way I could, by recapture from original tapes or upscale. I could do this work personally. And try to recast the rest of the roles with voice actors of their caliber. Ben Starr, get ready. Blood Omen 2. Ugh, this one is harder. It would be easier to play with the Soul Reaver Remastered approach, using updated models and environments, which it desperately needs because gross, and please, bug fixes. But to really improve Blood Omen 2, the story needs a redo. Now, an extremely talented and clever writer that's been steeped in the series for decades and has lots of recent experience cutting this stuff down to bare essentials, could rewrite the expository and unforgivably pedestrian dialogue for the cutscenes, and weave together a more compelling story out of existing assets. That is the Legacy of Kain way, after all. Kain needs some tweaks to bring him in line with the character we know, and the bosses desperately need polished dialogue.
I have a surprise for you, Kain.
Paul Lukather, Renee Auberjonois, and Earl Bowen have all passed on, unfortunately, so we would not have the benefit of their immense talents. Don't get me started on AI. With all respect to Bowen and his solid performance, the Seraphim Lord could be recast, as this is his only appearance in the series. I nominate Alistair Duncan, who voices the Hilton Lord and his unspoken dark entity guys in Defiance.
We shall have our revenge in full measure and for all time.
He's super hot right now.
It's difficult to be happy about anything when you're a reanimated head.
Janos would have to stay as he is, just more concise in his exposition dumps, but I'd propose a radical solution. What if Vorador was a different character entirely?
You would do well to mind your blasphemous tongue.
Now, hear me out. He already feels that way in the story, and Blood Omen 2 introduced lots of new vampires, so why not go all the way and make a new character with a new actor? Also, one of the biggest fumbles in Blood Omen 2 was the mishandling of Kain and Uma's relationship. After he kills her at the docks, he expresses some wildly unearned grief.
You could have been my queen. Now, you have left me alone.
But if they'd set up any real romantic tension during the game, that moment would have hit hard. Blood Omen 2 has a number of payoffs that weren't properly set up, but I think the bones of a more compelling story are here. It just needs richer dialogue, performances with more consistent direction, and native controller support on PC. Defiance. Defiance is great, but it will need work, and I think this could be a big reason why Crystal Dynamics hired Raina Andren. Congrats, by the way. There's not a modern console port, and the PC version does not support controllers well or easily, even with Steam. And the fixed camera is the toughest boss in the game. For my PC playthrough, I made a custom Xpatter profile and downloaded Vargatomi's texture and UI packs, and Nemesis 2000's widescreen fix. Updated models, controller support, and an overhauled camera, think the free camera in Metal Gear Solid Subsistence with the ability to switch back and forth, could make Defiance fit far better with Soul Reaver 1 and 2 and bring it into the modern era. Now, none of this will fix some of Defiance's other issues, namely repetitive environments, too frequent enemy encounters, and over-reliance on mural-based exposition.
Stones too can lie.
And if I have to forge the damn Reaver one more time, so help me. But it's the game most likely to get a remaster, and certainly the one I hear the fans asking for the most. Some good news though. As of June 2025, it looks like we'll be getting a Defiance port on PlayStation Network soon. If you've watched my play videos, you know how much I love trophies. Your strength. Trophies! Now, before we get into what could be, let's take a look at the last 2 or 3 attempts to make a Legacy of Kain game. The direct sequel to Defiance was intended to be Legacy of Kain: The Dark Prophecy. Not much is known about the story for certain, but lots of assets and concept art were created. And while it's widely assumed it would have concluded the Legacy of Kain story, there's no concrete evidence to support this. It might have at least filled in a few gaps that are still glaring today. However, Defiance failed to meet sales expectations, and The Dark Prophecy was cancelled not long into pre-production. For more information, check out Divine Shadow's The Dark Prophecy essays on thelostworlds.net. In 2012, Eidos, then owned by Square Enix, had in the works what was later revealed to have been a new Legacy of Kain game, Dead Sun. For the very most comprehensive information on the subject, check out this fascinating feature-length documentary by Bazielim on the Ancient's Den. It focuses on this vertical slice presentation, a nearly complete piece of the game. Huge thanks to Bazielim for allowing me to reference the documentary, and to Divine Shadow, aka Mama Robotnik, who originally unearthed the footage you're seeing. Developed by the studio Climax, this open-world-style game focuses on Asher, a human priest murdered by Gain, a vampire, I guess, with spectral abilities. However, Asher manages to displace Gain's soul and take control of his body. Incredibly ambitious, technically speaking, for its generation, Dead Sun looked like it would have been really cool gameplay-wise, with a rich, detailed open world, fun and fluid traversal options, with a very slick real-time realm-shifting mechanic, and also a Batman Arkham-inspired combat system. However, in my humble opinion, it would have been a complete disaster as a Legacy of Kain story. Conflicting reports cite both an executive mandate from Square Enix to minimize returning story elements, and more disturbingly, a general dislike among the creative team for the very things many of us liked most about the games: the convoluted story and eloquent dialogue. Dead Sun would have replaced this with more accessible, late-aughts forced edginess, leaning into gratuitous nudity, sexual themes, and even immersion-breaking cursing.
F you, fat boy.
Now, I'm no prude, but the intensity and tone of this material really clashes with the rest of the series.
If I'm gonna stick someone between my legs, it better be war.
Legacy of Kain has always been edgy, but with an elegance and sophistication that would have been tossed right out the window. While there are some genuinely interesting ideas in the world design and story, which ironically grew convoluted in its own right, the focus on watering down the dialogue and the push for more so-called mature content would have negated the connection that was being built to the larger series, which is apparent in the game footage. That said, I encourage you to watch the deep dive and form your own opinion. It also struggled to achieve a baseline level of technical stability in pre-release, and was cancelled by Square Enix, and we'll never really know why. I'm kidding, it was money. There's speculation that even after years of development, Square Enix recognized the risk of releasing such a radically different product under this IP, and didn't believe it would meet the all-important sales expectations. Normally, I'm sad when a game in a series I love gets canceled, but after watching the deep dive, I've made an exception. Also, if you want a feel for what Dead Sun would have been like to play, try Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. The two are eerily similar in many respects.
You are banished from death.
Like most games at the time, there was also a tacked-on multiplayer component, created by a separate developer, Psyonix. The multiplayer component was separated and packaged as Nosgoth. After a closed beta in late 2013, it launched on early access in 2014. But despite being a competent and interesting team shooter that actually respected series lore, it never made it out of open beta, and was cancelled without being officially released in 2016. I'm actually kind of sad I dismissed this one, because looking into it now, there was some interesting lore that I missed out on. Not to mention, a really fun game. I highly recommend checking out Tales of Nosgoth, Nosgothic Realm, and The Lost Worlds for more info on this. Links in the description. Going forward, let's think about where Dead Sun went wrong and what they did that could potentially work. Also, with the remaster fresh in our minds, we need to have an honest conversation about the strengths and weaknesses of the original games. The gameplay for each game is, by 2025 standards, kind of a drag, with clunky controls and slow, janky combat. The remasters have helped Soul Reaver 1 and 2 a lot, but they still show their age. The relative linearity of Soul Reaver 2 and the more aggressive linearity of Blood Omen 2 and Defiance diminish the strengths of Nosgoth as a world to explore. And with a handful of exceptions, none of the games have super compelling boss fights, by modern standards anyway. But the heart and core of Legacy of Kain is story, dialogue, and performance, and those are what make the appeal timeless. Any remake or sequel should never lose sight of that, and should place its story, script, and dialogue front and center.
You cannot comprehend the magnitude, the rapture, and the tragedy of this moment.
I think there's one thing Crystal Dynamics can do to ensure this is a success with the fans. Get Amy Hennig back and do exactly what she says. Now, if that's not possible, which is likely the case given how busy she is, a great remake or sequel would still be possible with these hopefully helpful ideas. In my opinion, Legacy of Kain's greatest weakness is the patchwork nature of the overarching story.
My God. The Hilden.
Crystal Dynamics should really consider retooling the story to smooth it out and bring it closer to Amy Hennig's original intentions. Maybe weave the Hilden in from the beginning, resolve some of the self-contradictory elements that found their way in later, or, I don't know, dump Elzevir entirely.
What an odd little man.
They should either overhaul the story entirely, or not touch it at all, and consider going the Metal Gear Solid Delta route, retaining all the original voice lines and music. I know this goes against the laws of corporate money, but it would be super classy to pay the talent and composers again though, just saying. Gameplay-wise, Legacy of Kain has always had a lot in common with Legend of Zelda, and I think that shouldn't change much. However, the vocabulary of gaming has much more to offer for the aesthetics and the style and the feel of the combat now than it did in 1999 and 2001. I'd love to see Soul Reaver 1 be the template for this, rather than the chapter-based levels of Blood Omen 2 and more open but still repetitive Defiance. Crystal Dynamics has already done something a lot like this with Soul Reaver's sister series, Tomb Raider. Imagine a Blood Omen 1 remake, built like Breath of the Wild for instance. A wide-open Nosgoth where you can go anywhere, find secrets and lost lore around every corner, and tackle the Pillar Guardians in any order you like. Dead Sun actually had a strong start in this direction. Or a Soul Reaver 1 remake where it leans into the Metroidvania exploration elements. And the Glyph Magic and Fire Reaver have a purpose. The first Darksiders game is a great example of how this could work, especially since it wears its Zelda, God of War, and Soul Reaver influences on its sleeve. Puzzles have always been Soul Reaver's bread and butter, and my favorite puzzles in gaming the last few years have come from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Tomb Raider has some good ones too. An interesting design challenge would be how a modern Soul Reaver would handle platforming. Even in the remasters, platforms are a bit rough, and in Defiance, well, the camera in the platforming sections is the real main boss. Do they go the Uncharted route? It would be fitting since that was Amy Hennig's series after Legacy of Kain, later walked by Tomb Raider, or try to create a new way to platform for the modern era. If I was any kind of gameplay designer, I'd have some original ideas for this, but I'm a story guy. Sorry. What would a modern Legacy of Kain game look and sound like? Well, I'm far from the first person to make this point, but there's a lot of inspiration to be taken from the Souls games. Few developers create huge, rich, dying worlds like FromSoft, and the looming gothic architecture of Bloodborne would feel right at home in Nosgoth. Meridian from Blood Omen 2 even feels like a proto-Yharnam. Now, I'm not saying it should be structured or play like a Souls game, and they definitely shouldn't try to ape FromSoft's narrative style.
Don't think too hard about all of this.
But there's a forlorn majesty, a sadness for ages long past in each of these that would really suit Nosgoth. Shadow of the Colossus did this very well too, and I want to fight some huge bosses. 30-foot tall Duma, anyone?
Not even Kain is my equal.
Just kidding. Unless you like that idea, then I'm totally serious. For the Spectral realm, we should look to the Medium, Bloober Team's 2021 horror adventure. It had a really cool approach of seeing into both realms at the same time. And, spoilers, with Kain newly able to see into the Spectral realm after Defiance, I think that would be a cool way to portray that ability. Naturally, combat will also be key to the experience. It is a video game after all. Both of these characters have the power of demigods, and most enemies are obstacles rather than true threats. So how do we get fun, interesting gameplay stakes without a contrived, whoops, lost your powers scenario? Here are a few ideas. The existing game with the most interesting combat is arguably Defiance. However, it was heavily influenced, like many games of the time, by Devil May Cry. A great game, sure. But while in Defiance we get a sense of Kain's power and speed, it lacks some impact, and I never really bought him doing air juggles. Blood Omen 2 actually deserves a special mention here, as the blocking rage mechanic leads to much more engaging combat with bosses and late-game enemies than the first hour would lead you to believe was possible. Now, another issue I had with Defiance was how similar Raziel and Kain felt to play, which is understandable given the timeline the team had to work with. That said, for a remake, I think we can look at two models for style and feel, one for Kain and one for Raziel. For Elder Kain, I want to feel power. I want to feel the crunch of the Soul Reaver as he brings it down in anger. I want to feel it drain its victims. I think the model for this style of combat would be the modern God of War games. Kain is one of the most powerful beings in the entire world at this point, and we should see what Raziel meant when he said,
"We knew what it meant when Kain drew the Soul Reaver in anger. It meant you were dead."
If we're talking a younger Kain, I'd say it could feel like The Witcher 3, but maybe that's just Geralt's hair flying around. Seriously though, that game is a great model for how to mix spells and swordplay. Either way, whenever we play as Kain, his style should feel heavy, crunchy, and powerful. Kain should also be a tank, able to misdodge and parry, but also trade damage and heal with blood. On that note, I think an interesting addition to the series would be real-time character damage. Soul Reaver 2 and Blood Omen 2 did this a little with enemy decapitations, flat as they were, but imagine what a Legacy of Kain game with an X-Men Origins Wolverine-style damage system would be like. Kain's wounds could close super fast, but only if you took the time to heal. And what if Raziel could lose an arm and keep fighting until he could feed and regenerate? And what if you had to mix up your moves because you've lost the use of a limb temporarily? Wouldn't that be cool? For Raziel's combat, we should feel speed and finesse. Raziel may not be able to die, but being hacked apart and sent back to the Spectral Realm would be very inconvenient, especially when he has to find a new corpse to possess. So he should be fast and skilled, and I haven't felt faster or more skilled in the game ever than Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. Methodical yet furiously paced swordplay that rewards calculated aggression, high-stakes parries and dodges with the occasional acrobatic flair. Raziel should be a glass cannon, incredibly powerful and skilled but also vulnerable, since his will is pretty much the only thing holding the fragile matter of his body together in the material realm. Also, I'd love to get back to using other weapons than the Reaver. I liked how different weapons had different uses in Blood Omen 1, and how Soul Reaver 2 forced the player to balance the Reaver's hunger with Raziel's health. And I missed that in Defiance, where the Reaver was the only weapon available. Also, let's see more forms for Kain. We got to see plenty of Mistform in Blood Omen 2 and Defiance, and then Bat when you died. But let's see Wolf Kain again.
My lupine form enables me to move like lightning and leap over obstacles barring my path.
If that form was that cool when he was first made, imagine what it could look like now. God, I'm terrible at that. Some more loose thoughts on combat. Defiance had the best feeding of the series, at least for Kain. He was much less goofy, but making that action interruptible would add some needed tension to the combat. There's a little of this in the existing games, but I'd like to see that amped up. In a sequel, it would also be very cool to have the purified Reaver warn Kain of danger from the back or sides, using in-game barks like in Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice.
Behind you!
Also, as much as I love the OP stealth telekinesis Fire Reaver insta-kill combo, maybe that should get a little balancing. So what do we do about music? Do we go with Blood Omen 2's rich, understated, dark ambience? Or do we try to channel Kurt Harlan's twisted soundscapes? Or do we go with Blood Omen 1's gothic melodrama? For remasters and remakes, I think the answer is simple. Keep what's there. at least for everything but Blood Omen 1, which could use a massive dose of Blood Omen 2's approach, and some of Elden Ring's brand of grand but melancholy underscore mixed in for good measure. For a sequel, though, we need new stuff. Kurt Harland, who now goes by Kurt Harland Larson, was the original composer of Soul Reaver 1, 2, and Defiance. If he were willing to come back, he'd be perfect, but if not, there are many talented composers who could give the new game its own unique voice, while drawing from the series' legacy. I say if we can't get Harland Larson, let's get Bear McCreary on it. Ragnarok was one of my favorite game scores in years, and thinking even bigger, I don't know if Trent Reznor would ever do a game again, but he composed the music for Quake back in the day, so who knows? For a sequel, I think the devs need to commit to something, and us fans need to accept something. We need to accept that there will most likely be a new lead or co-lead character, by necessity. Michael Bell will be 90 next year, and no one can ever replace him as Raziel, even though it's super awesome that he read a few lines for the Backer Kit trailer.
Night falls swiftly on Nosgoth.
That said, Raziel was once a new character too, so we need to embrace the expansion of the cast with open arms. The other side of that coin, or the edge, is that we need Kain. Simon Templeman is still doing great work, and I believe he'd come back to the series better than ever. We need Ariel too, depending on where in the timeline this would take place, and even if Anna Gunn is super expensive now, she's worth every penny. Suck it, Skylar haters. For the other roles, there are more talented voiceover artists working now than there's ever been, like me and that other Ben, for instance. And we have the potential to have a larger, more vibrant cast than ever. Maybe our leads won't need to do double or triple duty. One other thing that I would say, though, is put the money in. Get good voice actors, pay them well, let them do their thing.
Oh no. Every time you turn up, something monumental and terrible happens.
Dialogue, of course, is another crucial element to the Legacy of Kain experience, and Blood Omen 2 is the exception that proves the rule. While the rest of the series relates even the smallest tutorial elements with a Baroque flourish,
Within the walls of these chambers I could find respite, and if I so chose, resume my journey when my weariness abated.
Blood Omen 2 drops this deftly written dialogue for nearly every character except Kain and the Seraphan Lord at some moments, and hammers the player with many minutes-long cutscenes chock full of redundant exposition devoid of any subtext or depth. The characters talk endlessly, yet reveal very little except about what Kain is supposed to do next.
Go here, go there. What do you take me for? Your errand boy?
I don't think this will be a problem in the modern era of gaming with such amazing writers in the industry, but the series can keep its dialogue on track with a few simple rules. 1. Read Lovecraft. There's a ton of Lovecraft in both the story and the dialogue. Florid language, creating a mental landscape that brings every horrible detail into sharp relief. And keeping that style in mind is a great place to start. Again, edgy, but eloquent. Between the lines. This is screenwriting 101, but each line of dialogue should tell us something about the character or plot that it's not saying outright. Every time young Kain talks, we should hear his reckless, naked ambition.
I serve no one.
Every time Mobius speaks, we should hear the utterly convincing lie in his throat.
I have sought only to aid you in your righteous quest.
Give the actors spaces to fill in. Kain wouldn't be the character he is without Simon Templeman's sneering, haughty delivery, with a dash of sardonic humor.
As if Nosgoth needed assistance in making its corruption apparent.
And we wouldn't recognize Raziel without Michael Bell's seething, yet soulful performance.
It tortured me to see how noble and pure I had been, and what a vile phantasm I had become.
Whatever actor is cast will bring something special to the story as they interpret their character, and it will be important for the writers to allow space for that to happen. The sequel would necessarily involve some amount of retelling, but there would be ways to do this in a parallel path with the new narrative. Introducing a new character and having them be our point of view into the new Nosgoth, and then coming across one of these moments would be a cool way to do this. The opening cutscene of Soul Reaver, but in playable form from Raziel's perspective. Think this scene from the original Modern Warfare. Perhaps intercut it with Kain's murder from the beginning of Blood Omen, told the same way. I like how Defiance tied these two characters together, and I'd want to continue that. Going back in the timeline a bit, Vorador's assault on the Circle in the time of the original Seraphan. This would be a great tutorial level. And yes, I just want a playable Vorador, leave me alone. The creation of Kain's first vampire army, and an explanation for why Kain and Vorador don't trust each other in Blood Omen 2.
I still knew not to trust him.
Young Kain, reveling in the defeat of the Seraphan Lord, now faces a new rival, Vorador, bereaved and aggrieved after Kain's murder of his favorite child.
We were wrong ever to trust you.
Do you so wish to return to the grave, old friend?
Badly in need of allies, Kain visits the tomb of the Seraphan. The vampire clans and free humans warring in Kain's absence following Raziel's execution. This was the setting of the Nosgoth game, and I'm sad we didn't get to see more of it. Whatever they do, the theme should remain consistent with the rest of the story. Revenge, manipulation, disillusionment, self-discovery, and free will and destiny, always in conflict.
I set my own course from here. If it were only that simple.
And vampires. Vampires too. As to where the narrative could eventually go, I have some really cool ideas, but I'll hang on to them for now, in case Crystal Dynamics would like to hear them someday. Until then, they're just fanfic. There are a few specific things I think they need to cover though. Obviously, spoilers for the whole series ahead. At the end of Defiance, Raziel's apparent destiny has been fulfilled, and he's been consumed by and imprisoned within the Reaver.
This can't be the way.
Kain worked for centuries to change this fate, and despite the fact that Raziel's sacrifice closed his character arc in a complete fashion,
I alone could end this.
It's clearly stated he was destined to be the savior of Nosgoth.
I was ordained to assume the role of Balance Guardian in Nosgoth, while you were destined to be its savior. But the map of my fate was redrawn by Mobius, and so in turn was yours.
And I believe his true destiny was never realized. It's my biggest gripe with Defiance. I would love for Kain to figure out how to break this purgatorial cycle once and for all. And I think the best way to honor Raziel's sacrifice is for Kain to finally help him fulfill his true destiny. I'd like a canon explanation for how Vorador is alive in Blood Omen 2. I won't let this go. Maybe Human Uma breaks Vorador out before execution. Or maybe Kain worked to resurrect him after. There was a cut chapter from Defiance dealing with Vorador's resurrection, so someone was thinking about this. There are opportunities to give Uma a lot more depth here too. Also, another note, the series needs more women with agency. Ariel, Uma, and the Seer are pretty much it, so come on, more ladies. And others too. Why not? Vampires don't care about gender, only blood. We know Janos' fate after Defiance, but what about after Blood Omen 2?
No!
Is he still alive and imprisoned in the demon realm? Kain is still alive, even without the Heart of Darkness. How? And could the heart be used yet again? Can the Hilden truly be defeated, or merely just contained? We need a final confrontation if we're ever to have a real ending. What I want most of all, though, is closure. While Defiance closed a chapter in the story, the book is still wide open, and we've been waiting 22 years for a proper finale. Do Kain and Raziel restore balance to Nosgoth? Or will they be defeated, damning Nosgoth to an eternity of decay?
I need answers.
Consider this more ominous possibility.
I'm an adult, and I realize some things. Despite all of my excitement and wild hopes, I still have to acknowledge some of the depressing realities of the gaming industry today. It faces some major challenges, and the chances that we'll get a full-on AAA remake or sequel are vanishingly slim. That said, the devs shouldn't be afraid to think small with this. Smaller teams, smaller scope. And while I love ray tracing and 4K textures, those aren't as important as the story, the characters, and the world. Legacy of Kain might have been top of the line in graphics for its time, but it doesn't need to be today. It also doesn't need to be a grand 100-hour plus epic like The Witcher 3 or Elden Ring. Soul Reaver 1 still shows us today that we can have an interconnected world that feels vast, but in reality is compact, along with a tight story. I would not mind a 15 to 20 hour runtime for this. So how can we convince Crystal Dynamics and Aspyr that there's a market for more remasters, remakes, or the sequel we're all desperate for? You can interact in the community, you can at them on social media, you can even make YouTube videos like me. But the one thing that they will listen to more than anything else is your total amount spent. The sad truth. If you want them to keep doing this, you need to buy the Soul Reaver Remaster. You need to buy the ports of the other games. You need to vote with your dollars and tell them that you're hungry for it. And if they build it, you will come. And for the love of God, don't f***ing pirate these. Get the word out. Tell your friends, your family, and your followers on social media to check the games out. I'm ecstatic every time someone tells me in the comments that they've just played these for the first time. And growing the fan base is another great thing that we can do to help try to make these happen.
The coin is still turning.
There's still a chance it could land on its edge. So what do you want to see in a remaster, remake, or sequel? What game's DNA would you like to see spliced into a new Legacy of Kain? What loose threads do you want to see tied up? Let me know in the comments. I'm really excited to read all your thoughts on this one. We've got lots more Legacy of Kain stuff coming for you, and we'll be widening out for some new stuff too. We'll probably jump back in to talk about the new lore in the Dead Shall Rise graphic novel when it drops, and we'll definitely talk about the Nosgoth Encyclopedia and Scourge of the Seraphim TTRPG when we get ours. And of course, if we get a new remaster, we'll play that too. So in the meantime, Vae Victis. And if you haven't already, do the things. I've been working on this video for months and I've had a lot of help, so I just want to recognize some folks. It's been really amazing to see Legacy of Kain come back into the forefront this last year, and that would never have been possible without the efforts of people like Raina Audrin, Bazielim, Ben Lincoln, Divine Shadow, Lord Avum, and Tanaya at Nosgoth.net. These are the pillars, pun intended, of the Legacy of Kain fan community and have provided innumerable resources for all of us fans for decades now. Thank you for everything, and thank you for being so great with me personally as I've been making this video. Also, special thanks to Vargatomi, who created the upgraded texture pack for Defiance, which allowed me to get really nice looking captures for all of our Defiance content. And of course, the biggest thanks of all to the creative and technical geniuses who brought us Legacy of Kain to begin with. I personally want to thank Chris Zimmerman-Salter, Gordon Hunt, and the cast of Aegis, namely Simon Templeman, Michael Bell, Tony J., Anna Gunn, Paul Lukather, Richard Doyle, Renee Aubergenois, and everyone who's ever been in it, for getting me interested in voiceover as an art and a discipline, leading me to directing voiceover for over 15 years now. I, quite literally, owe my career to you. Thank you. You're all my heroes.